Hare Krishna, and welcome everyone to this talk for the 16 days of activism for safer communities. This is ISKCON's goal right now, is to create these panel discussions to improve communities and make communities safer, educate on leadership. And our topic today is leadership from a Vaishnava perspective. Within that, we'll dive into some power dynamics and what happens when leadership goes wrong and when leadership gets it right. So here with me today, I am Narataki Radha Devidasi. I also have Rambaru Brinkman here, as well as Janaki Devidasi. Rambaru, would you mind introducing yourself and giving some background?
Okay, thank you. So happy to be here. Well, I have been in the Hare Krishna movement, or International Society for Krishna Consciousness, since 1974. I am a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and I am the founder and director of Karuna Care Association that was established in 2019 on Janmashtami. And I'm also the director of the St. Camilla Center for Spiritual Care in inner city downtown Los Angeles. I am a board certified chaplain and a certified chaplain educator and supervisor. And I have a master's degree in patient counseling and healthcare, a grief support group specialist, a grief recovery method, and our house grief support group in Los Angeles is where I have done my training. So I'm really happy to be here. All of these topics are so important to our personal lives, as well as our public lives and our professional lives. How do we use our power as parents, as leaders, as just as people? And how do we practice bhakti in the process? That's where I am.
Thank you very much. Janaki, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so thank you, and for having me back again this year. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. I been around ISKCON since 1981, and I was a college student at that time, and then dropped out and joined the ashram. And then in 2005, I returned to school and finished off a bachelor's in psychology, and then went on to get a master's in social work. And I work as a clinical social worker, providing mental health therapy and addiction treatment. My focus has been on working with trauma in particular, and also looking at power dynamics in ethics, and using a particular model called the right use of power. So I appreciate being here again today to talk about this topic.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I look forward to learning from both of you and seeing where we get today. Janaki, we're going to start with you with defining some of those power dynamics, if you wouldn't mind, and just getting the ball rolling on that.
Okay, thank you. So as I mentioned, the right use of power, it's a model that was developed by Cedar Barstow to help understand how power is used and how to use it in a healthy way, especially when you have a hierarchical system like we have in ISKCON. And so then we have to really look at what those power dynamics are and understand how to use it in an ethical way. And so a couple of concepts are, we look at something called up power and down power. So when we have more power in a situation, we refer to that as up power, and we have less power, it's down power. And this can be also, we're all born with different degree of our personal power, but in society, then we also can get role power and status power. So as soon as we step into a role, it's like we have an added power onto it. So in our society, if somebody takes on the role of a temple president, so they're no longer just Krishna Das, they're Krishna Das, the temple president. And so what they have to say and how they do something has a heavier power or heavier weight to it than someone who doesn't have that role. Or, putting on the role of being a guru is an up power situation, being the GBC up power situation, or even just being the head pujari it has a layer of power to it. And so when we look at how these power dynamics, when you get someone who has more power by role, or sometimes like status, like things like being a male in our societies often gives you more power. Being a white person can give you more power. And so when you start adding these layers, then when we're interacting with others, we're not really on an equal platform, right? There's different things. So how do we navigate those differences? And what kinds of responsibilities do we have when we're in an up power situation? And what kinds of responsibilities do we have when we're in a down power? And so as we understand how that's working, we can understand like what things to look out for and how to accommodate the fact that there is a difference in power so that we're not misusing that power. And it's a spectrum. And so it's not just that we can misuse it by overusing it, but we can also misuse our power by underusing it. So if we're in a position of power, we have responsibility, say like for a parent. Underusing your power is not supervising them properly, not giving them guidance, not providing food for them. That would be an underuse of power. An overuse of power would be being overly punitive and restrictive and not allowing them to have freedoms to do things that children should be able to do. So no matter what role we have, in relationships, anytime we have a relationship and there's a power differential, we are navigating that, and we often throughout our daily lives are switching roles as we're interacting with other people. If we go to school, then our teachers have an up power role, but if we're a teacher, then we have a up power role, but our boss has a up power over us. And so we might be navigating these things all the time. And so having some understanding and education around this helps us to be able to enter into like the power zone where it's a healthy use of the power, and power itself isn't negative. It just means the ability to influence, but we want to influence in a way that's for the benefit of others, not just for our own personal interest.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for those definitions and for the example in the families. I'm wondering if you could offer an example that would be within one of our communities.
So part of like I mentioned earlier about like a temple president has more power than say the congregational members. So underutilizing the powers is not as part of the responsibility is engaging everyone in service and giving them the facility to serve the deity. So if you and amongst many, but that's one of the primary things that Srila Prabhupada saw, that you should, this is the purpose of our temples and our communities is to serve Krishna. So if you don't offer facilitation, then you're underusing your power. If you don't offer a structure and a way for those to get engaged, then that's causing, not allowing them to progress in their spiritual life, then that would be an underuse. An overuse would be putting too many demands and restrictions on people and only allowing them to do certain things, or they have to meet your standards, otherwise it's not acceptable. So overstepping the boundaries of what would facilitate a healthy community.
Beautiful, thank you. So I know there are some different acharyas that have offered education on what a servant leader looks like as being the ideal for finding that healthy power. So either you, Rambru, or Janaki, whichever one of you would like to discuss a little bit about what a servant leader looks like based on our acharyas.
Well, I can say something in terms of servant leadership. I know that Srila Prabhupada was very clear about the role of leadership in ISKCON in terms of inspiring people to take up bhakti, not demanding, but inspiring. That's a job of a Brahmin, is to inspire the public. We're not there to shame people, police people, blame people, but to inspire. It's the same thing we do with children. He wanted us to teach by engaging them in play, creative play, even to the point of getting on the floor and eating their prasadam. If they wouldn't eat it, put their plate on the floor and let them pretend they're cows to eat it. So a skillful leader is someone who knows, like Janaki said, is a way to engage people, particularly in their propensity, but also inspire them to want to do it. And we don't do that by being very rigid and shaming. I know in my profession, it's super important to join people where they are. So before you can even engage people or cultivate people, you have to find out something about them. It means doing a lot of listening first, finding out what their background is, what are their talents, their gifts, to give them joy. So if we say that we're a bhakti tradition, then we need to practice what we preach in terms of Lord Chaitanya's teaching by example. Yeah, don't talk so much about it. Show me what it feels like to be cared for in a leadership position. Prabhupada was so exemplary, even standing in line to use the bathroom in the beginning. He didn't say, okay, I'm the founder of this movement. Now here I am. You need to worship me, because, he didn't ever say that. So we can learn from that. As far as I understand from Bhaktisiddhanta, he also had he could be very bold, in the public, but he was so nurturing of the members of his mat that when someone got sick, he gave up his room for them. And he, not only that, he built a whole building for devotees who were sick. So I think we can learn a lot from the acharyas, the examples. And as a person myself who is very keen on how do we embody the bhakti we talk about, I think we need to learn some skills in how do we engage in a way that communicates care. I can hear already whoever's listening to or watching this video may be saying, but what happens? What about, when we have problems and we have to manage those problems? And I mean, we can't just, let's all be compassionate to those people, Well, Prabhupada said it's easy to kick people out, but it takes some skill to know how do I nurture and nourish and cultivate people. So yeah, you may have to say some true things, but it needs to be said in care, and it has to come from a place of genuine care. Even the hard facts about things. I take Nanda Maharaj as a great example of leadership when he had to punish or discipline Krishna because he was causing so much havoc in amongst the gopis, stealing their butter and throwing monkey stuff around. He was very, very naughty. And the neighbors complained about him, and he had to sit Krishna down. He said, look, I'm your father. I love you very much, but I've got to punish you. He said, what do I have to? I don't want to. I love you so much. But I'm going to have to tie you up because you've been naughty. So in this mood, to me, that's a really great example of how a parent, but also how a leader, if we do get out of line, we're not perfect, but how do I communicate that in care, confront with care if we need to? And that's the difference, I believe, in a leader and somebody who's just managing things. A leader is genuinely engaging with people in his care in a way that actually nurtures and nourishes them so that they want to grow and live up to a high standard of bhakti. So that's where I would start. Yeah. You want to add to that, Janaki?
Well, I was just thinking that there's so much about our philosophy and our tradition that talks about good leadership, because it's part of Varnashram Dham, is that we have those of a ruling class, right? And there's so many things in our scriptures that teach about what's a good leader. And we happen to be celebrating Diwali as we're recording this today. So Lord Ram was such an exemplary leader. And how did he care
Yes.
for his citizens? And how did his father care for the citizens? And so, and it was, they took it as a loving responsibility that they had for all of their citizens, and
Mm,
having a concern and welfare for each one. And in there, and in Bhishma Dev on the battlefield, the last thing he does is give instructions to Yudhisthira on how to be a good leader. So it's been valued in our culture, and the information is there. That's what's nice. It's like our acharyas have read it, and they do understand it, and they have spoken about it and given us the examples. And what you're speaking to is like leading by example is the major thing. You can't ask others to do what you're not willing to do. And being able to step up and by example to enter into that role is part of that responsibility.
yeah, that's very true. As we're telling this, talking about this, I have this little fable that comes to mind that many people may have heard it because I use it all the time, but about the wind and the rain, the wind and the clouds, they decided to have a contest. And the cloud said, look, see that man down there walking on the road? He's got his raincoat on. I bet I can make him take it off. And the sun said, okay, let's do a bet. Let's see who would be able to get him to take his raincoat off. So first the wind starts throwing down rain and blowing and freezing cold and hail and everything. And the man he just pulls his coat tighter. And the sun, he starts beaming brighter and brighter. And the guy gets so hot that he takes it off voluntarily. And to me, that's a really good example of a punitive, rigid person who misuses their power to try and force and dominate and control. And the person who is being the victim of all of that, it just withdraws and holds themselves tighter and tighter because it's a fear of God approach. Whereas the sun is the bhakti approach, just shine brightly, and people will automatically stop being defensive. They will not have a guard. They won't need a guard because you're safe. You've created a safe relationship, and they will just take off their artificial persona and coverings. And to me, this is the perfect bhakti process. How do we shine bright enough? Affirm people, validate people, encourage and empower people to take up responsibility in the mission of Lord Chaitanya, rather than trying to force people to do it. It's just not bhakti. It's something else. You can't call it bhakti. Just not.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's kind of run a little bit rampant within the society these days, which leads me to just wondering, as devotees that are caught up in these dynamics where it is more of a punitive approach, what capacity do we have as devotees to be able to address these concerns from a grassroots effort?
Well, just in my view, we just have to first of all walk our own talk. If we have a different vision, we have to also embody that and create spaces in our world where we can connect with like-minded people. Our society is growing so large, you're going to have people with different moods and modes, right? What's a mood? It's a mode. Was it a mode or a mood? But people who are into cow protection and deity worship and book distribution, they do different things. It's all for the sake of glorifying Krishna. But this is another tribe of people who are really interested in learning behavioral and attitude skills to communicate the love and compassion that we aspire for as devotees. So Karuna Care was created for that, to be a space where people can learn and study, how do I be a better bhakti yogi? How do I practice unconditional love for God and compassion for all living beings? It's easy to give lip service to it. It's a harder thing to actually practice, especially when there's someone in front of you who's very aggressive and maybe defensive and very critical of you. How do I embrace even those difficult characters and engage them somehow or other, connect? It may not be possible, and then you have to do what we call in chaplaincy the ministry of absence. You decide, but in a way that doesn't close the door, because today someone might apparently behave in an inappropriate way out of misunderstanding, a trauma trigger or something. But tomorrow they may want to come back and apologize, or they may want to come and say, yeah, I was, tell me what you were trying to say. I wasn't very patient today. And if the door is always left open, people have a space to grow and change. And the ISKCON movement is a learning, it's an education program. And that means we make boo-boos. We're human beings. There needs to be a space to apologize and come back and try again, have a do-over, as we say, So I think we have to, first of all, aspire for that ourselves, and find other like-minded people and learn about it, ways of creating community and connection, really understand what the 6 loving exchanges are. How do I actually engage in those things with other devotees? And yeah, go to the karunacare.iskcon.org, find some other folks who are thinking about these things, enroll in a course. Yeah, we've got lots of resources. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts with like us on our individual journey, making that a priority, making it something that we value in our lives, and living with integrity and living with that consciousness in mind, and looking internally and trying to shift our own shortcomings and focus on that and bring ourselves up to a higher standard.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, just as you say that, Janaki, what comes to my mind too is sometimes, and I saw this when Srila Prabhupada left the planet, is there was an endeavor to try to fill Prabhupada's shoes by imitating him.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've seen this in the Hare Krishna movement, that people try to imitate someone they perceive to be advanced or spiritually advanced. And while the person who is perceived as being advanced, it's authentic for them, it's not authentic for you to imitate that. And so we saw a lot of that kind of persona imitation of Prabhupada, using even to the point of having a Bengali accent, and you're from the United States. And it's like, that is just not appropriate. You're an American, you're not a Bengali. And some of the hand gestures and doing all of this thing, and even making Prabhupada voice sounds. but I think we need to be focused on finding, first of all, our leadership inside of us, in terms of being connected with the Lord in our heart, taking guidance from there, taking guidance from Shastra, taking guidance from other leaders who we admire, who do it well. And you can see all of us are not totally blind. Who's skillful at this? Who's skillful at managing difficult things? Do I want to be like that? Oh, well, then find out, get close to them, learn from them. If you see a leader who is not very skilled at leading, and you have in your whole physical being a reaction when you're in the presence of someone who is controlling and dominant and hurtful to others, just also pay attention. That's not who I want to be. And make a choice between who do I want to be and who do I not want to be. And if you're in a leadership position already and you're feeling a little bit of pressure from above or from the sides, that it's my way or the highway, or this is how we do things in ISKCON, it would be worth your own introspection to ask some questions. You know, is this really what it means to be a leader? Do your own research, find out. Google it. What is an effective leader? What is a servant leader? And don't just become a sheeple. Blind following is not something that we do in the Hare Krishna movement. We do things by argument and reason. Get engaged and get your questions answered. If it doesn't feel right, probably isn't. Doesn't feel like bhakti, it probably isn't. So if you don't see what you don't see, it's like the king has no clothes. Don't be, the king doesn't have clothes. I can't say anything because I will be criticized if I see what I see. So, yeah, you need to trust your heart and ask those hard questions. Critical thinking. What is really bhakti? Read these books that Prabhupada gave us. Read the purports, particularly Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the purports where Prabhupada's really giving clear instruction on how he wants his movement to go on and how he wants us to behave. So many great examples.
Yeah, you touch on like the concept of moral courage. It's like this is something we have to do, be courageous about it and be morally guided and not to just fall into following something if we know that it's not appropriate. We need to be, the blind following is not going to help us in our individual lives, and it's not going to help our movement if we're not critical thinkers and able to see things appropriately and through the right vision.
Yeah. And in some ways, we have to have compassion on ourselves as a movement. We're a young movement and we're still learning. We're never finished learning. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, with every endeavor, there's a fault. We're conditioned souls, which means we all have the propensity to cheat. So it should be out of love that we hold each other accountable for, staying true to the mission and message of Lord Chaitanya. What is that mission? It should be part of our daily questioning and hearing. What is really my goal here? What are we trying to do here? Is it to create a great project? Is that all we're here to do? We'll be all dead tomorrow. Are we creating these projects so we have association while we're doing it and engaging in loving relationships? And that's a question to have when we get all caught up in wanting to squeeze a square peg in a round hole. It's like, it doesn't fit. You got to fit you got to fit here. It's like, I don't fit. That's not where I fit. But being able to engage people in their propensities in a skillful way where they can be happy in Krishna consciousness and do their little contribution. Yeah.
You speak to what the bond of love speaks to, and I've been going through that with one of my god sisters. And I just appreciate how much Srila Prabhupada knew what everybody's propensities were and engaged them in their own authenticity. And I think that's something that a lot of us in the younger generation, we're still trying to find our authenticity. And we've been so plugged into social media and everybody giving us our identity that we've kind of lost our uniqueness in that. So are there ways that we can assist the younger generations in finding that unique propensity and engaging them in that way?
Yeah. Do you want to say something, Janaki? I can say
it's
something.
a good question. I don't I think, part of it is just being curious and helping them to be curious as to what that would look like. Sometimes it's a little easier when you're on the outside to see it when others can't see it for themselves. But I think if we approached it with a loving, caring, compassionate attitude and looking for, and just, like what is it that you gravitate to? What is it that inspires you and help to flesh that out without judgment, It's just like, it's like if this service is considered better than that service, then we might be judging ourselves if like, this is really what I just really want to do. And if it's not the highest, then it's still okay. So removing the judgment piece and being curious and no harm in trying on different things to find what it is. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
being open to being an individual and trying on different aspects of things and seeing, like
Yeah.
that really
Mhm.
resonates for you if it doesn't. And looking around like who inspired you? What are your dreams? What do you think? Like when you see somebody doing a particular thing, does that resonate with you? Is that something that inspires you? That might be touching into something that's important to you.
Yeah, I do a little trick, kind of a little exercise with people, and what I do is I have a piece of paper. I've got this weird screen, so but you divide it into four, right? Can you see that? I folded
Mhm.
it into four, and on the first column, I have people just write everything that gives them joy. What gives you joy? Is it music? Is it cooking? Do they like to sing? Do they, whatever. They just write a list of what gives them joy. The next column, I have them write, what are they good at? And they just write down, people like to sing, may not be good at singing. Right. We know that. Right. So you just get people to sit. I've done this exercise with many people and just give them plenty of time just to sit with that. The third column, I have them write, what does the world need? Let them think, what does the world need? And then the fourth column is I have them write, what will the world pay you for? Right.
Mhm.
Looking for a profession, because most young people in the 20s, they're trying to figure it out. How am I going to pay my bills? I might want to practice bhakti also. That's a spirit, but I've got to. It's no longer that you're now just coming and plunking down in the Hare Krishna movement and everything's going to be taken care of. No, it's a retreat center kind of place. It's an internship, and eventually you're going to need to get a job or something, find a way. So this can be really helpful if you want to find something that's in alignment with your own authentic self. Is first of all, figure out what gives you joy, because we are made of Satchidananda, eternal forms of bliss or joy. I like this word better than bliss, because bliss is not a word I use in English. If you can find that, that will go a long way to pointing you in a direction. It gives me joy to cook. I love working with the cows or whatever it is. But then, am I good at it? What do I do that's good at? So once you've written these four lists, you're looking to see if there's a thread that goes through all those things. And generally, if you can find a couple of threads, that probably gives you a good indication of where you might want to pursue. Gives me joy. I'm good at it. The world could use another one of those. And the world will pay me for it if I could organize it. So I find that to be really helpful. It's been helpful to me to kind of unscramble that in my head to see how can I monetize something I'm good at and I love doing and the world could use. My little 2 cents there. Yeah.
Nice formula. It's nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the simplicity of that. So, going back to the servant leader, Bhakti Tirtha Swami has a book. Is that right, Janaki? So would you like to explain some of the details of Bhakti Tirtha's views on servant leadership?
So there's a couple of things. I don't have the book in front of me right now to remember which one it is. Like, think Leadership for Higher Consciousness. And he studied, the scriptures and he spoke on it and made several points on it. There's one section is all based on an article or teachings from Bhakti Siddhanta about the qualities of a servant leader. And there's different parts through it that give us some guidance and to understand what leadership is about and what it's so there's different aspects. I pulled out a few quotes. So one is that if leaders are afraid to lead, then they are not actually leading. To lead means to understand the field of activities and what is necessary for the welfare of others. Understanding these things, a genuine leader must guide, coordinate, and act based on what he knows to be true. To lead means to guide from the front by one's own example. So this is one thing that he focused on. It's like we when we do step into leadership, we have to take on that role, and we have to do it with intention and intelligence, and be able to bring these bring those that are under us in a loving, caring way, move them forward, and bring them into to understand more about what their individual purpose is, and doing it for the welfare of others too. So that was one. Another one is that a sacred leader working under sacred power always thinks about the people's welfare. A proper leader, as Bhishma explains, should know his constituents well, as a mother knows her children, and he should protect and care for them with great enthusiasm. So you see it, again, echoing that part of the welfare of others, and knowing them, that propensity that we were talking about earlier. And it also involves like empowerment and delegating, and so giving giving them the facility, not just saying, oh yeah, you can do that, but then you don't give them resources, and you don't give them the authority to do things, and then it doesn't happen, and it's like, oh, that's your problem. But it's part of being a leader, is to empower someone to be successful in what they want to do. Right? So a few of the different pieces, but there are many very helpful things in his writings, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's writings, that can help us understand what it looks like to be a leader in a Vaishnava society.
Yeah. True.
Maria, do you have anything to add on the servant leadership aspect?
Well, I think I've said quite a bit about that in
Yeah.
terms of the difference between a leader and a manager. A leader is just as Janaki has said, cultivating and thinking about the welfare and nurturing people and joining them where they are, versus a manager just wants to get the job done. He doesn't care how, he doesn't, not thinking who's doing it. Doesn't matter who's doing it, whether they have COVID or they're sick or they're frustrated or fried, just get the job done. So they're more focused on the project than the people that they're nurturing. So I think that's an important distinction, because often the manager and the leader have the same, are on the same, under the same hat. You'll see in Buddhist temples, though, it's very much separate, where you have the spiritual leader who's doing the sanghas and the guidance, but then you have a manager who is behind the scenes doing all of the, maintaining of the ashram and that kind of thing. They have two totally different roles. I know in Christian churches, the pastor has to manage and do everything, and they fall apart quicker than anything, because it's dual roles. Very hard to do it all. So, but I would say a good leader would be inspiring enough that they would have people who would be wanting to assist, so that they can then create some space for them to do that thinking and contemplating about how am I going to engage these people in their own, and not just get them busy, but get them busy in something that gives them joy. And that every community, it doesn't have the luxury to, if you're in a small community, it's all hands on deck. You don't have that freedom, because you have deity worship has to be done in kitchen, it's like, yeah, that's easy, but I don't want to do it. It doesn't give me joy. Well, like in any household, you do have to have an understanding when you're in an ashram or a community that you have to keep the show going. And sometimes every community member has to chip in to do some part of the maintenance work. But all in all, though, there's a lot of time around that, that the leader could be thinking, how do I engage this person in a way that will inspire them to take responsibility for the Hare Krishna movement in their area. I'm here on an ashram. I didn't want to say that, but I'm in New Govardhan, and the leader here does very well. It's a large place and there's lots of possibilities, but he's very good at, first of all, we have our people who come new and they're doing everything. But while the devotees or volunteers are doing things, it becomes very clear, oh, they do that well. They're cooking. Oh, they love to cook. Let's get them busy in cooking. We have lots of kitchens around and different kitchen services. So they flourish in that, give them that responsibility. Or somebody who is really good as an electrician, they come with a talent. Okay, well, let's engage them in doing that for Krishna. And it works well because people feel themselves coming and using their past life experience. They're able to use what they know and use it for Krishna rather than totally making them start over. So I just think this model here is quite effective. How you first of all engage people where they are and let them shine. It doesn't take long to see what people are good. Some people are good at following, some people are a little more shy, some people have leadership. They come with a background of leadership. Let them lead something. Plenty of stuff to do. Take housekeeping for 50 retreat rooms, hotel rooms, How do you manage that? You need somebody good at that. Yeah. So that's just what I want to say is that there are some models in our movement who are effective, and keep your eyes open for what really works. And so far it looks like this works here pretty well. It's not perfect, but yeah, a lot of people come and they stay, get busy.
Yeah. One of the other ones that I've heard of working well is Krishna House, particularly down in Gainesville. Krishna House has been going strong for quite some time.
Yeah.
So again, some of these options for looking to what's working well and building off of that, right?
Right.
So
And it might be if you're a leader who's struggling, and gosh, if you haven't had any background in education, there's a whole lot of organizational management. You can take courses in it, but when you're the leader yourself, it can feel overwhelming. And well, it's easy to say what I should do, but I don't have a lot of experience. But it would be really smart to connect with folks who are doing this well. Look around, take a little trip around ISKCON and see what works. Talk to the people who are being led. How does it feel to be led in this model? And to, how do you say, read the pulse of the community. They will tell you very quick whether they're satisfied under that leadership or they're frustrated. Doesn't take long. Just go to a Sunday feast, but I mean, I think that's, people vote with their feet. If they don't like what's going on here, they move. How many people stay and how many people are attracted to come because they've heard, we have people here coming from all over the world because they've heard about this place. It's just, there's something very special about, again, we have problems. I mean, just managing a huge place like this is enormous. But when you cross over the bridge into this enormous property, it's so beautiful, and people are genuinely happy and peaceful compared to what they're coming from, corporate Australia. I mean, people come here. I just talked to a lady down at the village this morning. She must have been in her 60s and, learning to do yoga, and she's listening to the birds. She's taken training and recognizing bird songs in the morning and what bird is making that noise. But she just said, I've been here many times and there's just something really special about being here. Of course, we're engaging in nonviolence, the food is so wonderful. There's so many different kitchens. You can take prasadam. You have cows roaming around. You have cow tours. And it's just a very sattvic environment. People immediately feel that when they come in, and they come back just to have that feeling of unity, and people are very open. The devotees are also very open and interested and kind. That says so much. You don't have to even begin to preach Bhagavad Gita. You're living it. People see it. Something's different. She was telling me she had a son who'd been traveling for many years in a van, kind of a very rough kind of a guy. and he didn't want to come to visit her at the farm. And she said, yeah, they're so rigid. Those Hare Krishnas have so many rules. I don't want to go. I don't want to go and see you there. I'll come for an hour. He said he came yesterday. She said he stayed for like 7 hours. And by the end of the trip, he said, I think I'm going to come back. And she said, no, okay, what was that? What happened there? It was just the whole combination of the food and the people and the beautiful nature. So we've changed a lot. I'm sure there has been a history of, like we did in all ISKCON temples, hitting people over the head with Bhagavad Gitas to make them enlightened. But I think more touching and more influential is feeling oneself cared for in a heart connecting relationship. I think that speaks louder than any philosophy you can throw at people. There's a place for that, and we have classes, and we have the temple program and all of that. But nobody's coming up the hill. Nobody's coming up to the hill to the temple unless they meet someone who actually communicates interest and care in them as a person. And that takes time too. And if you're rushing around, trying to keep a tight schedule, there has to be some people who are noticing people coming. Hi, how are you? Yeah.
Radical noticing, right?
What did you say?
Radical noticing.
Yeah,
Notice that
radical,
person
yeah.
that needs somebody to sit next to them. Notice the newcomer that's a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Going off of the beat people over the head with scripture. Tell me a little bit about spiritual bypassing and what damage that can do, especially to newcomers or those undergoing stressors in their lives.
Janaki, you want to say something?
But where to start with such a big topic as spiritual bypassing? It's such a
Maybe start with a definition, if possible.
Well, I know I don't have one off the top of my head to pull up, but it's basically when can be something as simple as not addressing or dealing with an emotion that's coming up, but trying to bypass it by putting some spiritual thing on it, like, losing a loved one. And, instead of experiencing the grief and accepting the grief as a part of it, just saying, oh, we're not this body. So many other mothers, fathers, children, and ignoring what it is that we need to understand as we go through that process and allowing that to happen, right?
Yeah.
There's so many ways we can spiritually bypass, and there's so many ways to get to challenge can impede our progress because we ignore the things that we should be looking at, and putting some scripture in its place, putting some other thing instead of understanding that we are individuals and each one of us has our own journey and we have our own things that we're trying to explore and face. And it can get detrimental even to the point of even having, blind compassion can also be a form of spiritual bypassing. Someone's done some harm to someone else and, oh, we should be kind and compassionate to everyone, and we don't do something to protect those that are around that person because we're blindly compassionate. So that's another aspect of spiritual bypassing. So there's many ways that it shows up, but in essence it means is using our spirituality to not really truly address what it is that we need to be addressing, that we're going to give it a little paint it with this little spiritual thing, and then we don't have to look at it, right? We don't have to see it, we don't have to experience it because we put it in its little box over here. But it's keeping us from growing, it's keeping us from embracing life, and really missing the opportunities to grow spiritually because we're not not dealing with the things that that are coming up that we need to look at.
Yeah, you could also be like in terms of new people coming who are seeking an alternative to the trauma they've experienced. So many people I meet here are in transition, loved ones have died, or they've lost their job or their home. You know, housing is very tight here in Australia. And you know, they're coming looking for an alternative. They're looking for connection, and you now are not really listening to what they're saying, and you're just waiting for them to take a breath so that you can do your pitch, you know, your hammer, throw out some scripture, or you know, try to proselytize, or instead of caring about the person. I'm only interested in you if you decide that you want to take up bhakti. And what I see here is people come and they go, and they come and they go many times. They're coming and going. It's probably very, very unreasonable to think that everybody's going to now be a monk or a priest or a nun in the Hare Krishna movement, you know, which is our brahmachari ashram, brahmacharini ashram. So we need to get used to the fact that it's a gradual process, and to care about the people who come and cultivate them as they come, and wish them well, and whatever they take, a little prasadam, take a book with them, and not be so in this somehow a need to convert people overnight. You know, it's a gradual process. And I think that this spiritual bypassing is this need that we don't feel like we can care about the people in front of us, genuinely care, and find out you know, about their lives. Like, I don't care about your life, just chant Hare Krishna. Yeah, okay. But this is a coping thing that could be very helpful to chant. But I also need to know you. I want to know you. It's personal. I've gotten feedback from people who have come here earlier, like a long time ago, and said, well, you all have toned down a little bit more on your evangelism, your evangelizing, your need to evangelize people. And they find that refreshing. It means they're coming more often now, because they're not always confronted with this buying a book, sell me a book. You know, we're now seeing them, and not as a commodity to buy the book, you know, buy a book.
I just pulled up a definition so it can, and we've been touching on it on different ways. So it's spiritual bypassing is a tendency to use spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid dealing with unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, or unfinished developmental tasks. It can also be described as a way of hiding behind spirituality or spiritual practices.
Yeah.
So I think we were touching on some of those in our examples. To be able to.
Oh, being afraid of getting close to people. And I've talked to devotees here up on the hill. They're like, I don't want to talk, you know, because some people don't want to talk to the guests. So why not? They're here in our home. You should be hosting. Oh, I don't want to get influenced by their Mayavadi philosophy. Or, well, if you're strong, if you know what you believe, I don't have that problem. I just don't have that problem. But I mean, there's a kind of a self-preservation, that thinking somehow this fear that I'm going to be contaminated by someone else's view, that means you don't know yourself, and you don't know what you believe in. First, get real with yourself. But that's a spiritual bypass thing, this fear of human intimacy, this fear of human relationship, because I'm not differentiated enough in myself that I can't just be me and you can be you. If you're not being me, then I can't tolerate you. That's the real spiritual bypassing too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one that I have felt deeply of, not being able to develop my own unique voice, and having to be, you know, voicing just as the leader was voicing,
Parrot.
you know,
Parrot.
and I've heard that quite a bit, that we are just supposed to speak, you know, Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's words as it is, and not interpret for ourselves. So how does that come into play?
Well, that's yes and no. Prabhupada, first of all, instructed us to write our realizations, right?
Mhm.
He wanted us to take what he taught us and to write our realizations because he understood that time is moving, right? And to context and people, the philosophy is still the same. What is a man who's going to die in 7 days? What is his duty? So that's everything, how do we're going to die any minute. So what's the purpose of life? If we're going to die any minute, what should we be doing? The holy name is the antidote for so many things. All of that stays. But everybody is a person and they have their realizations. And Prabhupada wanted us to take what he taught us and share it in our own words, because he knew he's not an American person, or he knew that, and that we would be better off to know how to communicate with the people of our land. Many people have a hard time even understanding Prabhupada's tapes because of the accent. Not to say that we shouldn't listen to those things, but we're not meant to be blind followers or just parrots. That's a smarta brahmana. You're just doing it. You don't know why you're doing it.
Mhm.
Critical thinking is so much wanted, and Prabhupada used to have his leaders and test them. He would play the devil's advocate to see what they would say, and they go, no, that's a stupid answer, don't say that. Like he would see, how are you talking to people? So not imitation, following.
Yeah,
That's what.
yeah. From very, very early on, he told them, they were only playing his tapes when he was gone for classes. He says, no, you need to be all speaking and speaking your understanding and your realizations from very early on. And one of the biggest things that I've seen over years is like Srila Prabhupada engaged, teenagers and opening temples and going around the world to go in foreign countries. And now somebody can be around the movement for 40 years and we don't think that they are capable of, organizing the Sunday feast. It's like, it's that this big disjunct to like, just put, give them some understanding and then let them go. And he knew that they probably, that some 19-year-old in South Africa that was an American kid probably wasn't going to do everything right. But he had faith that Krishna would help them and guide them and teach them how to do things because of their sincerity.
Right. And that's a good leader also, is that he knows, he gives people, empowers people to make their mistakes. It's okay, they make their mistakes. That's how we learn. Keep them going. Okay, so I learned something here and let me try again. I mean, nobody's learning anything if you never let them fail.
Yeah.
And let's talk about it. This is this Gibbs reflective circle. There's something I use with my students when they write their reflections, but there's also, we call it the clinical method of learning: action, reflection, and new action. It's a constant thing. We do it all the time. And so learning doesn't happen if we don't fail and make mistakes. Learning doesn't happen unless we reflect on our mistakes and see what we will do better next time. If we miss that piece of reflection, then we don't learn from our mistakes. That's the problem. If we had more dialogue around, okay, this didn't go well, what do we need to do now? That's where we are now in the Mayapur Gurukul with, okay, that didn't go well, that model, something didn't go well. How can we do this in a better way? Rather than giving up, how can we do it in a better way? It didn't work that way. It's a value we want to keep working on.
Yeah.
Goes back to curiosity and compassion over shame and guilt, right?
And judgment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Anything else you want to add, Janaki?
I was just part of what came up in this discussion was that, like spiritual life is dynamic. It's always evolving and growing. And, it's like even reading the scriptures, every time we read it, we're in a different place and we pull out different things, understand things in a different way. And that's not going to end, and it's the same way, for others. And so being able to appreciate that people are in different places and they're going to embrace different aspects of things at different times in their lives, and that doesn't make it wrong, right? It's like we're all unique individuals and this resonates with us in certain ways. And so when we're genuine and connected to what that is for ourselves, that's when we interact with others, that's what's coming through and allows them permission also to be themselves and embrace it for themselves.
True, true, true. Okay.
Yeah. What obstacles exist that prevent devotees from feeling empowered in their communities and speaking up when there are challenging situations within leadership?
What are obstacles? Well, we know the obvious, people are afraid to get kicked out. People are afraid to be pegged as a whistleblower, or as a troublemaker. People don't want to have a bad reputation. Depends on where you are, what community you're in. So, but there should be a space for people to air their differences of opinion. Every healthy organization does that. Prabhupada created Istagosti for that purpose, so we could talk about struggles we have in Krishna consciousness, and that could be just the environment, could be a struggle we have. We gave it up as a movement because the temple presidents did not have appropriate skills or spiritual maturity to be able to facilitate those conversations without getting totally reactive. So they couldn't tolerate a difference of opinion or a discussion that didn't align with their idea. Didn't have there's a wonderful, I always point to this conversation Prabhupada had with Hayagriva and Kirtananda, who are no longer on the planet, in Vrindavan. And it was if you go to prabhupavani.org, it's the very first room conversation they're having. And the temple president, Hayagriva, has it in his mind from Prabhupada's books that ISKCON should be managed like a monarchy, because there's so many kings, right? And then in leadership and all of that. And he's telling Prabhupada, I want to quit. I don't want to be the president anymore. Prabhupada, why? Well, Kirtananda is now a sannyasi. And so, I can't be the ultimate authority because he's a sannyasi. And if I say I want to move that tree, he'll trump my thing and we can't do what I want. Prabhupada said, well, why don't you just discuss it, the two of you? And then he goes, well, that's not monarchy. You're promoting monarchy in your books, and I'm the president, so I should be the ultimate authority in this community. And Prabhupada, so you can read it. I said a translate. He said he started laughing and he said, nobody follows monarchy anymore. He said, we do democracy. They're like, well, but in your books, you're promoting it as the ideal king and the devotee king and all of that. He said, well, nobody does that anymore because we're in a Kali Yuga. It's all demonic, all absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've already seen that in World War II, with Hitler. That was we had plenty of that. We see it today in our world, how destructive it is for a person to ever be above the law, right? But he says it right there. If you want to listen to it, you can print out the transcript. It blew my mind because we have this illusion that Prabhupada was promoting a kingdom, that somebody should be now the president is like the king or something. The servant leader. And Prabhupada used to say there was some guest who was criticizing him. They'd come to some program and he shouted out, you think you're better than everybody, to Prabhupada, some heckler, Prabhupada. Actually, he stopped, he was very hurt to hear that because he doesn't think of himself that way. Mm-hmm. And a tear came down his eyes and he said, I am a fifth class servant, I am the servant of everyone, and so of course, we were giving him all these facilities because he was a servant of everyone. We could see that he wasn't exploiting us, and sometimes people get envious of having a nice car or somebody doing some little service for you, but no, Prabhupada didn't expect those things.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are just, lack of education about being a servant leader, lack of
education, yeah.
Lack of ability to to navigate the power differential in a healthy way. And it takes a lot. And, it's like too often as people move up the hierarchy, they start getting more and more isolated, and they only show up for class when they're giving class, or they only show up for a meeting when they're leading the meeting or the kirtan, and they get out of touch with their impact. Their
Right.
intentions may not be poor, but their impact is they're no longer able to read the impact that they have on the situation. And so there's these different things are just becoming more aware of what to pay attention to and what those barriers are, and opening up those lines of communication are so important to learn about ourselves as individuals, and learn as a society too, and to be able to navigate this and address those misunderstandings. Like, yeah, if you saw that if you're the temple president, you're supposed to be the king, it's like, and so sometimes we put this layer on things that this is what it means to be Krishna conscious, but it's a misunderstanding in the first place. But we get caught up in these ideas and we're rigid about it, and then we just create more problems, and we just, we don't open up to like, oh, maybe we're approaching this from the wrong way in the first place. And if we
Yeah.
took a different approach, maybe things would shift and change.
Yeah, it's not working.
Yeah.
Try something else. Not working.
And I think, Prabhupada had that ability. He would try things, and if it didn't work, he wasn't rigid about it. Well, I'm right, so therefore we're going to continue in this way. He was flexible. He took feedback, and he was able to work with it.
Yeah. He prided himself in being liberal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very liberal, even to the point where we say we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. We don't wear leather products. But when the Sankirtan devotees' feet were getting ruined by flip-flops on concrete 40 hours a week doing books, he said, they asked, our feet are getting wrecked, and the best shoes are leather. Wear leather shoes then. Wear them if that's what you need to do Sankirtan, because it's you're doing that in the service of a higher mission.
Yeah, the higher principle.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So just to kind of start wrapping up, what resources are there for leaders to cultivate their skills?
I would just point back to this Right Use of Power website. Cedar Barstow, who's retired now, is the founder of, I think it's Right Use of Power Inc. Is there
.org.
.org. She has a very kind of a basic little 5-hour course, I think, over the course of 2 days or something, and a little book called The Power.
Living in the Power Zone.
Living in the Power Zone. But the bigger book is a little more, I mean, you would want to read that, but to attend one of her courses, you do need to do Living in the Power Zone. It's a little book, concise. It really gives you everything you need to know in terms of when you're in a down power position, how do we gently communicate, confront even someone who is maybe abusing their power, or being disrespectful, or doesn't feel okay, to how do I engage that? And if I'm in up power position, what are my duties in terms of having 150% responsibility for repairing a ruptured relationship with someone in a down power position? It's a really good little course. And if you have any sincere desire to learn how to be a leader, I would encourage you to take the whole teacher training course also. There's I don't know how long it took us, a year, but it was very spread out to just really immerse yourself. And the bottom line of her ethics, it's a course on power ethics with heart. So it really aligns with the bhakti process, and that learning, how do I communicate with care to my up power so they don't throw me out of the temple? How do I gently and with care and concern for them, knowing that maybe they don't know what they don't know. I mean, we all don't know everything, right? So I think her pathway in terms of organization and whatever position you're in, how do I get my voice in the room and confront with care? How do I manage conflict? It's inevitable that there will be conflict. It is the pathway to understanding. But she gives you some really good skills and information. So I would start there. Honestly, I point people there if they really want to become a leader, a servant leader with a heart, you know. That would be where I would start. What else have you got, Janaki? There's other things, but that
Yeah.
would be a starting place.
Yeah, I think that's a real good starting place because it talks about a lot of skills and gives you a lot of the language to use and that. I also really appreciate Bhakti Tirthamaraj's work. He did
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
leadership, and reading, his book on leadership for a higher consciousness and especially about what it means to be a servant leader. I find devotees are really interested and want to know. When they hear these things and it's presented in that way, they really do want to understand and embrace it and find it very useful for whatever your position is. It can be really helpful to understand this concept of servant leader and what are those qualities and something about imbibing it. And I think, it's like it kind of touching on spiritual bypassing is not trying to be something that we're not, like really doing our own personal work. I think becoming a leader, you have to do your own personal work so that you're not bringing your stuff in to
good
the room.
point.
And it's
Yeah.
like, that's like key. If you did nothing else, but you did your own personal work and addressed your issues and got some more clarity on what that is, so many of your relationships would improve because it's Kali Yuga. Probably every one of us has had some form of trauma in our lives. And so understanding trauma and how that impacts people's ability to interact. And so becoming knowledgeable about trauma-informed leadership as well is another piece of that
I'm
understanding.
so glad you brought this up because all of us, whether you're a leader or a counselor or supervisor or a teacher in a high school, a teacher, elementary, a parent, self-care is so important because it is a competency of a chaplain, but anybody, professional ethics, code of ethics and stuff, self-care is the pathway to do no harm. There's so much research connected to people behave certain ways because they don't get their own needs met. So there's a little acronym called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that some counselors use to help remember. If I'm hungry, of course, on a fast day, some people, somebody told me, well, on a fast day, I don't fast because I'm ready to kill people when I fast. So I just don't, I don't fast on a Ekadashi or whatever, But if you know your limits and you can care for yourself, knowing what you need, I'm hungry. I'm angry. Okay, I need to take a break. I'm feeling angry now. If I engage in this conversation now, I'm going to say all kinds of things I don't mean. And that goes for leaders too. You catch them at a wrong moment, create a boundary. Let's make an appointment for tomorrow. Today, I don't feel well. You don't have to say I'm maybe mentally depressed or I'm mentally angry or frustrated. You don't have to tell people why we need to do this tomorrow. Angry, lonely, that's a big one. Isolation and loneliness is the third leading cause of death in the United States. And part of that has to do with just feeling depressed because you're lonely, but also not having any connections. Also the cause of mental health issues, you're isolated, you don't know how to connect, and tired. Gosh, so many devotees, when my husband and I were training devotees in Ireland, they're ready to bloop, they're ready to run out the door. And he'd say, wait a minute, you go take a nap and then get up and eat a big plate of prasadam, and kaboom, they're back. Most people, they get frustrated because they're just not rested enough. So I would say that's an important piece for leaders to know. Take care of yourself, take breaks, don't become the 24/7 go-to person that has to answer the phone every minute. This is a burnout for pastors and priests also. They just have no boundaries and they don't care for themselves. And then eventually what happens, they become a victim and hate the people they're trying to help. They just are like, now they're fighting with them because they feel like a victim of other people. But you've signed up, you're the servant. They're looking to you because you're in that position, get off the position if that's, but it's really about boundaries and self-care. I would say for leaders in order to do no harm, because you do hurt people. You say and do things you wouldn't do if your needs were taken care of. It's really important. Yeah.
Beautiful. Any final closing thoughts from either of you?
Just keep learning. Keep
Yeah.
reaching out, keep learning, hang out with people who are on an eternal search for truth and expertise in embodying those truths that we promote in the Hare Krishna movement. And if you see something that needs to be done, don't just sit on the sidelines and criticize people. Try to step up and add whatever's missing. If you can, do something to fill that gap.
Yeah. Show up with compassion, and not only for others, but for yourself. It's an important piece.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. All right.
Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. I wish you both well.
All right.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank you for
Krishna.
having
Take
us.
care.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,